This is the College Gamers Podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to the College Gamers Podcast. I'm Mike Gallants. This is a very special episode where I had the amazing opportunity to interview Kyle Furgusson of the amove.tv network. He is half the duo that does Into the Nexus, a very popular Heroes of the Storm podcast. And I sat down and got to talk to him about podcasting, video games, and coaching in Heroes of the Storm. So I'll shut up now, and I hope you enjoy the interview. I know I did. Hello, everyone. This is the College Gamers Podcast. It is a special episode because I have the honor of interviewing the one, the only Kyle Furgusson. Hello, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.
So for people who don't know you, what do you like to do around the internet?
I do Heroes of the Storm content for a little Blizzard MOBA game that has since become decently popular. What a wild ride it's been on the past 3 years, from the alpha into a beta into a rather clunky release, but 2.0 came out about 3 months ago, and the game is really, I think, alive at the moment. Certainly the esports is going nuts, coming up on BlizzCon for the year, which will be the sort of Super Bowl of that video game. And I cover all sorts of content for it, news, and I'm also a Heroes of the Storm coach, which means I do training for people who play video games.
I see. So so you do like one-on-one coaching, or a team coach?
A little bit of both. Teams, of course, are difficult to work with just across the internet. So a lot of the times I will meet with just their team captain, sometimes the entire team. But as I said, without actually being there in the house, it's mainly kind of more of a one-on-one sort of coaching thing. Just like you might hire someone at your local music store to teach you violin. People come to me to learn Heroes of the Storm for their bracket. It's one thing to hire, a professional player. Even there's professional coaches out there. But something new in this sort of generation is the sort of mom and pop corner store coach.
It's interesting. That's pretty exciting. But we can get more into that later. So I wanted to open up with E3 just finished. I think it was last weekend's. Did you see anything that excited you there?
Lots that excited me and lots that has my curiosity, but I've been hurt before. And I think I was most recently hurt by Dishonored, the original. And nothing really wrong with it. I had a decent time with it. I just thought it would be more kind of coming from that Bethesda pipeline. Mm-hmm. So I've been betrayed recently, and so all my sort of alarms are going off. I love God of War. I'm nervous about whatever that thing is with the companion kid going on.
I'm really curious. So you said Dishonored. Are you talking about the first or the second?
The very first one that came out.
The very first one? See, I loved that game. So I'm really curious.
I got my expectations too high.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Because there was Call of Cthulhu, which was released by Bethesda as well. And Dishonored looked like it was kind of going back to that first-person-y, but more story-based. Because that's kind of the problem with Skyrim's, right? I love the first-person mode, even though it's clunky. I love that sword and board sort of stealth style that those games have. So this looked like it was really going to run with it. But ultimately, the sort of theme, and particularly the bad guy, the dark one, was just a dude, just some emo dude. It didn't make any sense to me.
I gotcha. But have you played the second one yet?
No, I actually didn't touch it.
No? I really enjoyed it. Now, it's more the same. So if you weren't a big fan of the first one, I don't think you'd be too big of a fan of the second one. But I was excited by the expansion coming up.
It's been interesting. I didn't really get into the new BioShock either. I of course beat it all the way through. Just didn't, completely fall in love with it. Right now I'm fully in love with Wild Hunt, which I know is a 2015 game. So I'm running late here. Here's the Storm, right? I mean, it's been out for 2 full years. I feel like I'm just getting caught up on 2015 now. Just finished watching Gravity Falls as well. So maybe I've finally caught up to 2017.
I gotcha. Well, let's talk about a bit about your podcasting career. So I'm curious, when did you start podcasting?
That would have been in 2010 now. Oh my God. Yeah. I graduated in 2009 in May. And as many people do, particularly in the sort of performance industry, they picked a major city and they had that direction. I picked Chicago because it was a bit more modern and not as extreme as LA. So you got sort of the three big choices: New York, Chicago, LA. And Chicago has this weird sort of acceptance. They really like new things, whereas LA can be rather rejecting of new people, and New York can be rejecting of new ideas. So Chicago is kind of this nice little hipster middle. Ended up living actually in the hipster neighborhood over by Six Corners, which is where all the beards grow.
Oh,
When I
see.
first got there, it was great, but of course had to get part-time jobs, had to get all the sort of working downtown business because I was living in an expensive city. So around January of 2010, so about 6 months later, after working at Old Navy and all sorts of bizarre side jobs, started up a podcast with my buddy Brockett at the time, Brockett Bola, who I did Biggest Fan Podcast, which was a general pop culture comedy show. I did an improv troupe with him in college, as stereotypical as that is. And then that show led me to get in contact with Garrett Weinzierl some 2 months later when he got into the beta of StarCraft. And he remembered hearing about this guy he kind of knew, and he loved StarCraft, and he already had a podcast, so maybe he could help him out with the technical aspects of it. So he invited me on for the beginning episode.
Nice. And that show would become Starcast, right?
Exactly.
I see. So, all right, I'm really curious. Can we still go and find the Biggest Fan Podcast somewhere?
It is available, yeah. It actually gets reposted regularly. He sort of cycles the old episodes. I know he's continued the show. I did have to leave the show because it was growing for him, but Heroes was growing for me. And so the two sort of time consumptions had to be split. The real thing about doing a pop culture show, as I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of content to consume.
Yes.
In order to stay up to date on things, you got to go to the movies and you got to watch the TV shows. And really, the killing blow for me was when we did the big TV shows like Battlestar Galactica, which I probably shouldn't, say on an interview show, but not a fan of.
Oh, I see.
And I just couldn't get into, and so it made those sort of episodes quite grueling and time consuming.
I understand. So how long did you do the Biggest Fan Podcast?
Until I left Chicago 3 years ago. So it did go on for a good solid 4 years, covering everything from, I watched Jersey Shore for that show. I watched all the Nightmare on Elm Streets. Game of Thrones, of course. Those ones were the easy ones, right? The ones where I already wanted to see. Think Pacific Rim. Just every single movie or TV show that came out during that 4 years.
Wow, that's that is a lot of content. So Starcast, I was wondering, like, how long have you been playing StarCraft before you got into the podcast?
I had been playing StarCraft since that would have been 8th grade for me.
Oh, wow. So
that was...
Sorry.
Go for it.
Sorry, I was saying, you by that point, you've had quite a bit of experience with StarCraft.
Yeah. But it was mostly in the custom games kind of department. I did a lot of Verse AI just for fun. One of my favorite things was to be the one Zerg and then set up 8 opponents that I would have to fight of just human, as though I was taking over Earth in 8th grade. I always thought that was awesome. Do that same thing to the Protoss. But mostly I ended up online playing tower defenses and custom games along that way. But that led me to Warcraft 3, which got me into the original version of Dota. So sort of this evolution. In fact, even during the majority of the StarCast days, I still probably played more Dota than I did actual StarCraft, though I did love the 1v1 content of it. And I thought it was the best chess game we had at the time, certainly with matchmaking. Warcraft 3 Dota, basically match made by personal notes we had against each other until Dota 2 came out. And then I started playing that heavily, and as I got more and more into that, StarCraft continued to sort of leak out, but also the game didn't have a news cycle. It was an expansion game. So you would have these big hits of new content, but that would last you 2 years. And between that time, it was all about the esports. It was about the professional play, which is just amazing because there's so much room to be professional in StarCraft. The casual player just simply isn't able to execute the level of play that these athletes are, for lack of a better word. And I think they truly are athletes because of that performance. So it was a weird situation, a weird balance, as the show talked about things that weren't actually executable at home for most people.
I see. So, it sounds like Dota kind of is what led you into Heroes of the Storm, other than being a Blizzard fan, from the sound of it.
Yeah, of course. That's one of the main sort of drives of the game, is it got everyone who was into Blizzard things into a MOBA. Whereas Dota could absolutely be like, hey, look at this model. Isn't that cool? That's Illidan. This is the old model for Arthas on horseback. This is a Tauren. But those interactions, the Super Smash Bros.-ness of the exchanges between the characters just don't exist in Dota. They're their own different things. And frankly, Dota's full of those same sort of opportunities, like StarCraft, to be a really good pro player with last hitting and gold mechanics and farming, and the longer games that mean there is room for more mistakes, but also more risks. So it is still an excellent professional game. But Heroes of the Storm got rid of that fluff that kept so many of my friends from enjoying or even trying that game mode.
Mm-hmm. Also, it's, Heroes of the Storm, we get heroes periodically, so it sounds like there's also a bit more news to cover, not just the esports.
Yes, that is definitely my favorite part of doing a show about Heroes of the Storm, is the content does roll out very regularly, every 3 weeks, if not a balance update every week. And that just means we get to, as a community and as less than top tier professionals, have an opinion, have a say, analyze the situation, because it is brand new. If something gets to ferment or be on the boiler for too long, it goes to the top end and starts to just sort of stagnate at that high end level as the decisions have already been made, which is frustrating during an interactive video game. And I know lots of people who would just rather say, why can't I pick what I want? And in some situations, there is the facts and math behind the best talent build, the best hero. But often, because things move so fast in this environment, we get to decide for ourselves.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you coach here at Heroes of the Storm. You do a podcast on it. You stream on Twitch. How do you avoid burning out on Heroes of the Storm? Because you seem to play it a lot. Like, do you know how many hours a week on average you put into the game?
Okay, so this was a brand new season, so if I were to do the math, that would mean I played over the last week 25 games of ranked, probably 8 games of quick match, and then I had the Team League stream, so that would be another 6. So it is a lot, and you're talking about 20 minutes to half an hour for each of those games, and I'm still sort of on the low end for a lot of players. In fact, as a content creator, you always run into this issue where you may not be able to watch all the esports, and you may not be able to play all the games you wanted, because once you finish playing games, you go on to make Photoshop images and edit video and upload those things, which means the second you upload things, now your ping is bad. So you can't play video games while you upload. The content creation cycle can be a little brutal, but, I'm not complaining. I love my job.
Yeah.
But avoiding burnout it's 100% a committed effort, and that's what makes it so difficult. Video games are fun. The work to get good at them is enjoyable along the way. It's not like working out where you have these reps and you don't just do a curl for fun in the first place, but now you do it 5 times in a row, or 5 sets of 3, or however many you're on for that particular go. And it's not quite like an instrument, because you do need to practice to maintain a certain level of play. but it's not showable because it's fully interactive. If I can't bust out a song on my guitar and say that's the most awesome version I've ever played, because there are 9 other, I don't know, strings, goblins jumping out of the guitar and just plucking other strings that I have to deal with and keep slapping down and around. So and at the core of it, that means there's no physical exhaustion. You don't go play soccer outside and then your calves hurt and you go, oh man, I feel so rewarded, I'm going to go home and sleep. Video games leave you open. In fact, they probably wake you up more. They get your mind going harder. So avoiding burnout has to be a conscious effort for anyone who plays a video game. And for me as a professional coach and content creator, it's Fridays. Fridays for me are sacred, blocked out days. Or even though I have so many of those days off, I have to entirely stop myself from playing Heroes of the Storm. And it's not out of hate. It's not out of even recovery. It's out of the recovery I know for the next week.
I see. Yeah, I see. You see, like, so the next thing I was going to ask you was, how do you make time for other games, making all this content, playing like, trying to stay atop of your game? But it sounds like Fridays is the day to do that.
Exactly. And right now that is The Witcher. And I am just entirely absorbed in that game. I believe, though, as of today, the new Darkest Dungeon expansion comes out. So you can see just sort of from my thought process of my recent games being, well, actually the Wild Hunt is really involved. But normally I end up in non-real-time strategy or something very low-key. Mm-hmm. So recently, Planet Coaster was a big one for me. Darkest Dungeon as a turn-based game. Card games like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering Online. Like anything that gets as far away from that third-person reaction scape as possible.
I gotcha. That makes sense. You're trying to unwind. I understand that. So let's move on to coaching. You mentioned earlier. I'm really curious. When did you start coaching? When did you get the idea to start doing this?
That was in 2015 in the early winter. And actually, I had a friend who does art. And I wanted to learn how to do Photoshop for all my videos. And basically so I could stop bothering friends every time I needed an image made for a podcast or something like that. So I contact my friend. I say, hey, could you give me Photoshop lessons? And he says, yes, if you give me Heroes of the Storm lessons. He's a artist professional, does art for the Star Wars video games and for the box art. So he's just incredible. I felt completely just overwhelmed with privilege to even be trained in like how to move your brush by this guy. Like taking him all the way from top tier down to something I should probably learn off of a YouTube video, but was too impatient to do so. So I was teaching him Rhaegar at the time, which was one of like the few supports in the entire game. And as he got better, he kept insisting that I take this show on the road, that I open it up to other people, that this was a valuable resource. And so I did. I started out by doing replay reviews. I would have people send me in a replay on my stream. I would talk over it, give them some tips, and then that video would be posted for them to watch and absorb that content. Those started being more popular than the actual stream, and so I started charging a small sum for me to record those offline and then shoot you back the video just 1v1. Then it just continued to grow from there as people were like, can I ask real-time questions of you? And okay, well, let's make a block of an hour. And then let's make 2-hour blocks, and then continued to evolve into what it is today, which is shooting over a bunch of replays first. I select out of their account replays to review ahead of time so I get to know the player, really get to know their mechanics and their skill level, because rank isn't exactly a tell of those executions. And then we meet for the hour, now with all this research done, and it really is just sort of a tight, compacted, I would even say shotgun approach to learning. As you sort of run with the information, I give you a big pile of notes as well written out, and then usually once a month, because they have to go then take all that information, execute on it, and become the better player.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any success stories you want to share?
I'm certainly proud of a lot of my students. Many of them have gone from bronze to gold and upward. I have several successful chair league teams, though interestingly enough, they always seem to duel each other, so I won't say any names. It was kind of funny. A couple of weeks ago, I actually was hired to train a team because they couldn't beat another team that I had trained.
Oh.
So it was this amazing and flattering moment as I had to help them figure out the secrets that I had taught their rivals.
Yeah, that sounds like good marketing.
It was very enjoyable too.
So what challenges do you face coaching a team compared to coaching the individual? I imagine it's a bit more complex.
The hardest part is the commitment.
What was that?
I'm sorry, you broke up there for a moment.
No, I was just asking what you were saying.
The hardest part is honestly the commitment of the entire team, just because we are working in a more casual environment here. Using that time efficiently and getting everything I need to communicate to the team captain as well as the players. And if all the players aren't on the same level or aren't as interested, because there's 5 people, there's always going to be someone who's taking a bit more casual.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say those are probably the biggest challenges. Outside of that, you're just dealing with, the personal aspects of how people learn, and different people learn extremely different ways. And some people are very resilient or have very strong ego barriers built up where you sometimes all you end up saying is, that's great that you understand that strategy. Let me see you execute it.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I wanted some coaching. Would I approach you and say, I want to become a better warrior, I want to become a better assassin, and you would then build off of that, or do you kind of have pre-built not strategies, but I guess courses in a way?
Yeah, it's very much based on the heroes that they personally play. I don't believe that everyone will be interested in every hero.
Mm-hmm.
So for my sort of demographic, if you're not interested in the hero in the first place, there's very little reason for me to teach you it, because it does all come down to practice. If I get you on top tier Vala, because she's amazing everywhere and every pro loves her and she's going to see high levels of play all the time, but you don't care, you're not going to play Vala and you're not going to get good at Vala, so it's not worth that time. We'd be much better spending that time, as silly as it may seem, in a meta as we currently are, on Raynor and getting you good there, because at least I know you will then continue to build on those skills after the meeting.
I see. So you have to have some passion for the character they want built into. They want to get better at.
And some people are just passionate about winning, and they don't particularly care about what hero they do it with. And everyone has sort of these different ticks and why they choose to play video games in the first place. But there are people who show up, I want to get good at warriors. I want to avoid learning bad mistakes. I'm a brand new player. I just want to see what mistakes I have. Also, there's a good amount of people who come to me just to sort of get a rank assessment to make sure that they are not the ones holding back themselves, that the people around them are the causes of a lot of their frustrations. And by identifying those, you could call them opportunities, you can find ways to climb. So, for example, if you are a support player, there's a lot of opportunity for a support player to have a really big impact in low tier games because they choose who survives. And when your bad Gul'dan and your great Vala are both under attack at the same time, and you choose to Divine Shield the Vala and let your bad Gul'dan fall, that is a great decision. You've just made an extremely powerful decision for the rest of the team. And so much of this is based around Hero League, which is a solo queue environment. One player teaming up with 4 people they don't know and doing it the best they can. So a lot of it does come down to of my years and years, now 14 years of MOBA experience, and how you sort of read the battlefield and the skill level of those around you and the choices you make and how those affect the rest of your gameplay.
I understand. So you mentioned Dota. You obviously play Heroes of the Storm. Have you ever touched League of Legends?
I installed it once and it scared me.
Oh.
So I left.
Why did it scare you? Just maybe they have more heroes or something?
Yeah, and it was also I also tried Smite, and for the very same reason, I've left it because that menu was so frightening. There was a billion buttons, there was lots of tabs. I had to level up something that I didn't quite understand at the time, and then there were things I was supposed to attach to different guys. There wasn't a suggestion of a hero system, though I wanted to go for like this giant bug thing that attacks real fast or digs or something like that. Like there's some cool heroes in League of Legends, merely that it is a game of information ultimately at the end. Mm-hmm. And with heroes already under my belt and with Dota under my belt, which I grew with both these games as they added more and more heroes over time, I have to know exactly what's coming at the lane. And if it's 5 heroes all running towards me, I need to know what every single one of them does in order to have any sort of informed and accurate reaction to that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, how much Dota do you still play?
At the moment, I would say maybe a game a month. And that is more just for nostalgia, to kind of go back to enjoy an old hero. There are still heroes and archetypes that don't exist in Heroes of the Storm that do exist in Dota. And I do make my way over there to enjoy that fantasy for a bit, whether it's Undying or Necrolite, who's a little bit like our new Malthael character.
Mm-hmm. How, like, you're very skilled at Heroes of the Storm. How well do those skills transfer over to other MOBAs?
They do okay. And the ideas of skill shots and identifying the maximum abilities of a hero will translate quite well. And I think people who play less strenuous games, like even World of Warcraft to an extent, because they've done so much min-maxing in the past, they're going to understand how to use their ability. If an ability does damage and heals you, make sure that you're missing some health first before you deal the damage so you actually get a part of that heal. By absorbing that damage in the first place, you absorb damage that someone else didn't. Maybe you caught a fireball that flew by your face and you jumped in front of it for your ally and then used your ability that gave you health back. Now you created a value-rich environment, and even people who play things like Hearthstone can find real opportunities to use that knowledge and math in Heroes of the Storm. The most simple being, if you have an area effect, an explosion, and it hits one enemy, okay. If you hit 5 enemies, great value. And so just simple things like that can always translate.
I understand. Doesn't Dota 2, that uses an item system, right?
It does.
It does. Do you ever miss that in Heroes of the Storm?
I do miss the ability for any hero to transform themselves into the support. And it makes drafting in Heroes of the Storm extremely important and a lot more difficult. But at the same time, then you go in knowing you have a full comp available. And I think Heroes of the Storm benefits from that system because it's tied to World of Warcraft, and people come into our game thinking about who's tanking and who's going to be doing the healing. In Dota, it was an item. There were certain heroes that had support like spells. There were certain heroes that were always powerful regardless of their income, which is really what made them supports. If you can imagine a spellcaster versus a damage dealer, a weapon wielder. Weapon wielders, the more they change out their weapons, the more powerful they're going to be. A bigger gun is going to mean more damage. Whereas if you're a spellcaster, you can give yourself more mana, more health. You can even, in some ways, augment those spells. But your damage, your CC, that freeze you do on the ground, is already as good as it'll ever be. You can spend your side money helping out the rest of the team with wards and those mechanist healing spells and whatnot. Yeah, the problem, of course, being there that someone didn't agree to that maybe ahead of time. We all got in the game, and then we say, who's the most spellcasty spellcaster? Oh, it's you. Okay, you're support. And the guy goes, well, I didn't want to.
Oh, I got you. I'd also say that not having an item system makes the game more new player friendly. Because when I first jumped into League of Legends, some of my friends showed me how to play and which items were good, and I had no idea what I should buy, what I should get. I got the boots because they look cool, and I think I moved a little faster. But I would say it's it's more friendly to new players if you get your character and you know what that character does when you choose it.
Definitely. And when you know that that item is already for you, like the town system does, none of these are necessary. Some of them are weaker choices just because the way we figured things out through math and effectiveness. But you can't accidentally buy the wrong thing. And in fact, the whole item combining system of those older tier MOBAs really doesn't make any sense on a base level. It's just merely that in Warcraft 3, you had 6 item slots. So the guy, Ice Frog, who was making it, decided to let those combine into bigger items because we only ever had 6 slots.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a relic left over from Warcraft.
Exactly. A lot of these are. There's many bizarre things, particularly in Dota, that were reprogrammed in. It's an entirely new engine made by Valve, but they worked in those oddities just because there's so much legacy to some of these interactions.
Mm-hmm. So one last question for you. You mentioned you got a degree in theater. First of all, I'm curious, what concentration within theater did you get?
I did theater and communications, and there wasn't a broadcasting degree at Florida State. There was a great film school, a great theater school, and I knew I wanted to do sort of the more performance side of things. Never really too interested in the video aspect, always more live performance, but I always wanted to go into radio. And so throughout my schooling, I was surrounded by a lot of really talented actors and a lot of people who really wanted to go into stage, wanted to do New York, wanted to do, actually, no matter where they ended up, they just wanted to make sure that it was in front of a live audience, doing stage productions, doing Shakespeare, doing whatever the big play of the day is. And I was a bit of an oddball in that situation because I grew up out in New Mexico where it's just desert and everything is a hour-long drive to go to the grocery store, to go to school, to pick up your friend. So I got really into radio and audio books, but I'm dyslexic. So improv became it because I couldn't read off a script live at the same time while making those words happen. So it was this weird sort of, it was a weird place for me because everyone around me was very traditional. They wanted to do the Shakespeare, whereas I, at the entirety of the time, knew in the back of my head that this isn't permanent. Technology's moving on. What's that next thing? I thought it was radio. Obviously, it was the internet. And the radio industry actually tanked really, really hard the year I graduated, 2008, 2009.
So it sounds like you found your degree very useful in podcasting.
I did, and kind of a surprise to, I think, many people. Actually, the majority of people I graduated with, and in fact, just about everybody I moved to Chicago with, gave it a shot. You know, they tried their hardest. They got a couple of roles. But at some point, every single one of them, unless I'm mistaken from now being removed from there for about 3 years, but about every single one of them got a part-time job that in the city was a little cushy, and the acting stopped.
I got you. Well, it sounds like you went out in the end.
I'm a little proud of it. I just had my 30th birthday, so I've been doing a lot of looking back, but I am pretty proud of actually using my theater degree. I think that's a bit of a rarity in this world.
Yes. Happy birthday again.
Thank you.
Hope it was a good one. And I think that's it for today. You want to point people anywhere where they can find you on the interwebs?
Absolutely. You can find my shows at amove.tv. You can also find fantastic podcasts like Angry Chicken there, For Azeroth. You can also check out my personal stream if you're into Heroes of the Storm and seeing it played at a high-tier environment. That would be twitch.tv/Kyle Furgusson, 2 S's in Fergusson.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it. Thank you again for joining me, and have a great time doing whatever you're doing after this.
I shall. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
This has been a Blue Cow Radio production. Find more at bluecowradio.com.